told her the idea, thinking maybe we'll put a panel on a CR. And she came back a couple days later with initially a week-long event. It was very ambitious, and it was very inspiring to see that. But we whittled it down to 3 days. Ask questions for them after this next speaker. So with that, I want to introduce Professor Stuart Altschuler, who teaches in the Addiction Studies program at CR. Welcome.
So I will use the mic, but my students know I never need it. My name is Stuart Altschuler. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I've been living in Humboldt County, particularly Ferndale, for 17 years, and been teaching at College of the Redwoods for about 16 years. Teaching at Redwoods is one of the last joys I ever experienced to find at almost age 75. I have to say that. And I look around this room, and I have to say, well, that I'm looking out and my eyes see too many people of my own generation sitting here. Okay? When I get into my classroom and I introduce myself to my students, I tell them, since I'm training them to be addiction counselors, they need to know and understand the concept of historical trauma and how it impacts people and addictions to begin with. So in one class on diverse populations, on our section on African Americans, I showed them a 2-hour documentary about Freedom Summer. Some of you none of them know what Freedom Summer was. It was civic engagement where mostly white people, organized by the black community and black leaders, got college students to go from the north and all around the country to Mississippi to live in the homes of African Americans and help register. They created freedom schools. 3 were killed, and that wasn't solved for decades later. It's the understanding of the sociological and the historical context. What I liked about Wednesday night was that it was laying out the sociological and historical context of what's going on. So I want to tell you about an experience that I had. I'm a member of the Humboldt County Democratic Central Committee, and I'm a delegate to the California Democratic Conventions. So in November, we had a convention, and this was right after Israel really... Okay, I want to say before I go any further, I agree it's a genocide, okay? I also believe that Israel has an apartheid society. And I have been feeling this for decades as a Jewish American, okay? And I know that there are other Jewish Americans in here that have been watching this for decades and have that sadness, because it's a profound sadness to watch this going on. And on a political level, Hamas is not the Palestinians. Most Israelites are not Netanyahu, the same way most Americans are not Trump. The far right in every community has to cause as much pain and violence as they can, or at least the threat of it, in order to maintain power. That's what Hamas has done, that's what Netanyahu and his party has done, that's what Trump and the Republicans have done, and if there are any Republicans in this room, I'm not going to apologize for that statement, okay? So I'm agreeing with you.
Well, I would say, according to Times of Israel, 90% or more of Israeli citizens believe that the amount of force being used in Gaza is not sufficient enough. So when we say it's the far right, is 90% of the population of Israel far right?
Well,
I challenge that
agree.
narrative.
I don't agree with the
According
fact
to
that
Times of Israel are far
okay.
right.
So anyway, so I want to get back to
Sure
an
not.
experience I had in November
These are
at the
Israeli,
California Democratic Convention. So it was late afternoon, and I had about a 2-hour break between the sessions that went on in the morning and the LGBTQ caucus that I was waiting for to start at 7 o'clock. And I was sitting very comfortably trying to get some rest. And all of a sudden, there were a lot of shouts and Palestinian flags and things on the balcony above where I was sitting. And all of a sudden on J Street, it was in Sacramento at the convention center, all of a sudden on J Street, behind the glass wall and doors where I was sitting, was this amazing group of a few hundred people carrying Palestinian flags and bullhorns and all this stuff behind me. Basically, they shut down the convention that evening, and at a certain point, I know I have to make this quick, but what happened was they shut down the convention center and the security escorted as many people out as they could. I was stuck between the protesters up there and the protesters on the street behind me, okay? I surrendered to it. I took out my camera and I started filming this whole thing. I always thought, gee, how do people know to start filming these things? You just know. Okay? All of a sudden, the people from the street were let in, okay? It wasn't by permission or anything. And I followed them all up to the next level. And when I got up there, this Palestinian man came over to me and he said, "What time is the election?" I said, "What election?" He said, "Isn't there an election tonight?" And I said, "That already took place. It was done remotely on our phones." And I could see his face drop because their goal was to disrupt the endorsement election. So instead, they did a sit-in. You all remember sit-ins, right? They did a sit-in. And this guy and I started talking, and I could feel the confrontation coming. And I said, "Before you go any further, okay, I'm a Jewish American, and I wish there was a ceasefire right now. You're not going to get any argument from me on that." And within a few minutes, there was 6 men from this demonstration and myself standing there having this conversation. As soon as I said, "Look, I'm Jewish American and I support the ceasefire and I wish the president would come out in favor of it," and we started into this conversation that was probably one of the most moving and profound conversations I've ever had with anyone. And it was just that, a conversation. There were a lot of things that were said. And we were in agreement on all of them. And in that group was this, he couldn't have been more than 17 years old, and his head was down as like, he didn't have his voice yet. He had no confidence, you could see. But I could see him leaning forward, and he said, "Can I ask a question?" And I leaned into him, and I said, "Sure." And he said, "I saw on the internet that all Israelis want to kill all Palestinians. Is that true?"
90%.
And I said to him, what I say to all of my students, don't believe everything you read on the internet. Go deeper. Most Israelis want peace. Most Palestinians want peace. They all want their own home and safety in their own home. And this just, he ended up asking more questions because as soon as he saw I was listening to him, he found his voice. It was very moving. So when I got back, James Falk, anybody ever see his show on Keat?
Yeah.
Headline Humboldt, okay? He interviewed me about this and did a report on it. So he defined CIVIC as the object of political protest is to bring attention to a cause and stimulate dialogue, okay? So I was in college from 68 to 72, and this is what I tell my students. What was going on in 68 to 72? Civil rights movement, women's rights movement, Cesar Chavez was going on, huh?
The Black Panthers.
The Black Panthers were going on. The gay rights movement started in 69, and because of that, I was able to come out of the closet as a proud gay man in 1971. I mean, that was early.
Leonard
Okay.
Peltier.
Huh?
Leonard Peltier. American Indian Movement.
All of this was going on, and Vietnam, and the drug culture, and I was at Woodstock, and all of this stuff was going on at the same time. In 1970, there was a student strike from one end of this country to the other. We shut down every campus in this country. Okay? Anybody remember the student strike in 70? Okay? It's important to know that there's that kind of power. And I bless you with the type of power and energy you bring to this. I understand, I may not understand you personally, but I understand the anger. Okay? I hope you get that I really do.
But you're we're not 17-year-old kids who need you to give like confidence. Like we don't need your blessing.
I'm not giving
really,
you.
like talk about ivory tower, but like this is a lot. This is a lot.
Okay, this is a lot, okay? And I'm comparing my experience, ivory tower, yes, most definitely, but it's the student activism, it's that age group, and into the 30s, where so much of that passion and that energy comes from and has to come from. And we need to educate people that it's okay for that energy to come out of that. All right? So one of the things that they said to me in that conversation, all right, one of them looked at me and said, "We feel invisible. Nobody's paying attention to us." Okay? Boy, did that resonate back to the 60s and 70s. If you're parents, you know that your kid, if you're not paying attention to them, that tantrum's going to get louder and louder and louder, and more violent and more violent and more violent. That's the way kids get your attention, and if you don't pay attention to them early, it explodes. It's the same thing that happened in the 60s and 70s. I lived through the AIDS crisis, and it's the same thing that we weren't seen and we weren't heard, and people were dying here by the thousands, and nobody in our government were paying attention to us. We were going to memorial after memorial after memorial, and burying our friends one after the other, and nobody was paying attention to us. We weren't seen. So you get a group like ACT UP, who made sure that we were seen and we were heard. And what happened, and what happened Wednesday night, with I think the same group that you're with, as soon as you got the microphone, you were seen, you were heard, and the energy softened. And when they said we feel invisible,
After that.
what?
It was so harmful to our psyches, we couldn't even stay for the discussion.
Yes.
We were seen and heard, yes, but it took forever. This is such like.
But what I'm saying to you, I'm a psychotherapist.
I
hear what you're
graduated
saying
with
about the
experience
damage to your
psychology,
psyche.
We could go degree
Okay.
for degree, bud. Like.
Okay? Yes, I get it. I have been helping people with wounded psyches for 50 years as a therapist.
Oh God.
Okay? And what happens is there's no quick answer. You want Biden and Harris and everybody to come out immediately and say,
Arms embargo.
arms embargo now. Arms embargo now. That's all.
We do. We want it now because thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people have died already.
I agree.
It has to happen now. It is urgent.
And I agree, and it's not going to happen.
But why?
Not now. It will.
Will it?
Yeah, I believe so. What I said to these guys during that conversation, when I say, why won't the Democratic Party pass a resolution condemning this? Why won't Biden say? And my response to them was, what they can say in public, unfortunately this is politics, is different than what they're saying behind the scenes. And I guarantee that Biden was giving Netanyahu a piece of his mind. And it was a week later that there was a ceasefire and hostages were released. Okay? So
That was a long time ago.
it was a long time ago, and a lot of people have died. Okay? I'm not disagreeing with any of you about any of this. Okay? And I hear how painful this is for those of you who, well, to all of us, it's painful for all of us.
Thank you. Thank you for all of us.
Right.
That's why we're here.
And that's why we're here.
Because we feel the pain.
Okay? We feel the pain, and this is about dialogue, because that dialogue is the first step to the activism, and the young people that are back there from Cal Poly, and I actually see a couple of my own students, I'm glad to say, from CR. My job as a teacher is to get them to speak up and get active in these things, okay? I have a challenge, and this may sound very political, which it is. I have a challenge for those of you who want to start passing the torch to the others, to the younger people, okay?
We already have the torch.
We got it, but
We already know. That's why we're not in the room. I hope you know that.
We're out
When you
there.
look and
We're
you
out
see
there.
older people in this room, it's because the young people are awake and we see it. We've been witnessing it live stream for a year, witnessing slaughter for a year.
We're all watching.
We
We're
are,
all watching.
I don't think you're seeing what I'm seeing, or you would be in the streets.
Okay, so I won't go into what I was going to challenge you to do, but what I want to say is, you don't know what I'm seeing. You don't. And for you to make those assumptions is as wrong as me assuming anything about you. Okay? You don't know the pain that many of us sit in front of our TVs and watch, and we're looking for ways and avenues to address it.
You should see what's not on the TV. See what's not on the TV. What's
Okay.
being live streamed by civilians. Live streamed by civilians. You are getting an edited cut of what the U.S. government is okay with you knowing.
I do
I am
watch.
watching actual babies being beheaded by bombs. I am
watch.
watching the entrails of children strung across fucking towns.
I do watch.
This is not what you're seeing on fucking ABC or CBS. I know it's not.
I do watch it. Okay?
This is what compels the teenagers, the college kids, the 30-year-olds. This is our world.
Yes.
We are living in it. We're stuck with it. It must stop now. It's horror what we're witnessing.
Yes.
And no, I don't know what you've seen, but I will tell you what, the people that I know who are seeing what I've seen are driven to direct action. I thought this was about civic engagement, and this group did not invite the one organization that has been consistently civically engaged regarding Palestine and activism for the liberation of Palestine in Humboldt County. We did not get a call, we did not get an email, we did not get a message. We were not invited to the table. You did not want to hear our opinions, and so we disrupt so that we can be heard, because we are not brought to the table. We do not have a seat at this table.
I want to hear you. And I'm listening.
Let's do it. Let's switch.
Thank you.
Stuart. So, for exactly that reason, we're going to transition now. I've asked the speakers, both Pete and Stuart, to go to tables, as I said I was going to do earlier, to answer questions, to have conversations with you about your questions and concerns about things that they've said. And they're open to doing that, so I appreciate that. But because this is a night about civic engagement and activism, and because I know there are so many people here who have experience in civic engagement and activism here that are from different movements. Actually, let's do this. Let's do this right now. I want to see people stand up if you were involved in a particular activism. I'm not going to be able to name them all. I apologize. Let me just think about, let's go all the way back to the civil rights movement. If you were involved in the civil rights movement and you can stand, or you know somebody directly involved in that civil rights movement, please stand. If you were involved in anti-war activist movements, please stand. If you've been involved in the Black Lives Matter movement, please stand. You're right. Environmental movement, please stand. Anti-gun violence movement, please stand. We've got a lot of wisdom here from different movements. And we're going to have time for discussion here in a second. What I want to do now is I want to set each of you free in your own tables to talk amongst yourselves, because what we've got to do now is we've got to figure out how to move forward after these difficult conversations. We've got to figure out what the kinds of philosophies, the kinds of theories, and the kinds of strategies so that we can move forward to make a difference for peace and justice going forward after this conference ends, after this community conversation ends. So there are some table facilitators at each table, and I want you to talk amongst yourselves we've got about 20 minutes, and then Rabbi Naomi's going to come up, we'll transition to some dinner time.